Hi everyone, I'm Christian Becerra, and today I want to talk to you about the National Collegiate Athletic Association and their harmful policies against its college athletes. In my speech today, I'll be referring to the National Collegiate Athletic Association as the NCAA. So what is the NCAA? According to the NCAA's website, the organization claims, and this is a quote, "The National Collegiate Athletic Association is a member-led organization dedicated to the well-being and lifelong success of college athletes." According to the NCAA, there are 500,000 student athletes. Now that you understand a little background about the NCAA, my main claim is that the NCAA and its policies are harming college athletes. To defend my claim, I have three secondary supporting claims. College athletes are unpaid employees. Number two, the NCAA and its universities profit off of its student athletes. And number three, its students are deprived financially and physically of care from the schools in which the athletes work for. So back to my first claim. College athletes are unpaid employees. According to Forbes.com on college athletes, it states the typical D1 college football player devotes approximately 50 hours per work to their sport per week. This is above the average amount of hours worked for the typical work week in America. So this means that the average NCAA athlete is working more than the average worker in the United States, full-time worker that is. Another excerpt written from the article by Forbes website further states, agreements players sign when recruited, university coaches get to dictate more of an athlete's life than do most employers. Where they live, whether and when they speak to reporters, how they use their social media, when they go to bed, how they dress on team trips, and how they study under the direction of the coaching staffs. Just as a workplace, the employer dictates you and your demeanor, and how you handle yourself with others is dictated by their employer. So for my second claim, the NCAA and universities profit off of the work of its student athletes. Furthermore, I'm going to list these statistics, and I'll explain at the end of my second claim. According to Sports Illustrated, the University of Alabama reported $143 million in athletic revenues last year, more than any NHL team and 25 of the 30 NBA teams. A report by the NCAA reported a total net revenue of $1.1 billion in 2017. According to SBNation.com, in 2010, the NCAA and CBS Turner Sports agreed to a 14-year, $10.8 billion deal that will run through 2024. Forbes further stated in their article that much of the huge revenues collected from college athletics do not go directly back into the classrooms. So why did I tell you the statistics? With all of the revenue generated by the NCAA and the colleges that have college sports and student athletes puts tremendous amount of time into the sport and does not receive any further financial support from the school they participate in. So on to my third and final claim. Students are deprived financially and physically. A statement by the legendary NBA and UCLA basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on an article written by theguardian.com states, playing basketball at UCLA was a 7-day-a-week job involving intense practices, learning new plays, playing home games, and traveling around the country to compete against other schools. Our efforts earned millions of dollars for the university, both in cash and in recruiting and advertisement to attract new students. But I was generally too poor to do anything but study, practice, and play. A little spending money I managed to scrape together was earned on summer jobs. That money had to get me through the whole academic year. It was frustrating to win championship after championship every year, hear thousands chant my name, and go to my bedroom to count my change so I could buy a burger. So this means that with all the games and practices and all the hours he spent going and working, that at the end of the day, he still struggled to pay for his food. So, and according to another CBS article / study done on the Pac-12, which is conference in the NCAA, argues, a sampling of 409 conferences found that, or conference athletes found that athletes are stressed and time demands from their sports create anxiety and the loss of sleep that hinders academic and athletic performance. So with the statement being said, that the NCAA and universities put student athletes under to keep up with their academics and competitive edge to compete in athletics. If the student athlete does not excel in the classroom and does not excel in athletics, they could possibly get their scholarship revoked and kicked out of the school. Along with mental stress, the common student athlete deprives along with mental stress, the common student athlete deprives its students, is deprived of health care and may cause the student to be responsible to pay for their own surgery and rehabilitation if injured. A New York Times report states, "I thought I was covered," said Erin Knauer, a Colgate University student who piled up an $80,000 medical bill after injuring her back and legs and training for a crew team at the school. Student athletes are deprived, overworked, and left with not enough time to get a job. They're also deprived of proper mental and physical care they need, but are unable to pay for because they do not have the means to pay or seek the help that they need. This was my speech. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for your time.
All right, well, the proposition's identified. There's a pretty clear setup of what the secondary points are going to be. Some of the points need to be expressed a little bit more like declarative sentences, and I do think that you're missing a response to an important rebuttal issue that's going on here that I'll mention when we get toward the end. You signpost as you go along pretty clearly. Your proof on the first point is mostly about the number of hours that they put in and all of the requirements that they are obligated to follow through on as a condition of being on the team. So, I mean, that outlines that. I don't know that it shows that they are employees, though, that they are, in fact, participants in the program. There needs to be an explanation about what constitutes employment. I think this would be one of those places where if we were looking at U.S. labor laws and see if there is a criteria or definition that defines what an employee is, and then the question is, do the conditions under which the athletes participate in this meet that? I think that well, obviously the universities are going to deny that they're employees because they don't really provide the kind of services that employees provide. They instead participate in an activity for which they get a different kind of compensation. And that's the argument that I think that you're missing an answer to, because there is some compensation that the students get, that the athletes get, but you don't largely talk about it, and that's in the form of scholarship and coaching and other kinds of assistance that they might get. I'm sorry about Kareem, by the way. Kareem is, in my mind, the greatest basketball player of all time, and I say that as a USC fan. So, I'm nice reluctant testimony on this one. That he couldn't afford to get money together for a burger, but I'll tell you what, the athletes do get a training table that they get to eat at on a regular basis. The food at the training table is usually pretty damn good, and I'm not exactly sure why, Kareem suffered. And by the way, that was 50 years ago, as opposed to, what's going on right now. So maybe you wanted some updated examples too. But I appreciate Kareem. I mean, he's an authority on this. He was an athlete in college, and he did run into those things. So I'm not saying he's not an authority or somebody that we ought to listen to, but I do think you need some additional data on that. You had a couple of examples. Kareem was one, and then the crew woman was another one that suffered the back injuries. I do think that you need to explain a little bit more on that particular point what the rules were on that situation. There may in fact be a reason why they were not covered by the health insurance of the university. That seems like it's an exceptional case as opposed to a typical case. If it is in fact not true that college athletes are covered by the healthcare plans that they are, that they pay for, or that are paid for them, or that are provided to them as a member of the university, then that needs to be explained. And like I said, that seemed a little bit vague to me. The other evidence that you present, talking about the amount of revenue that the schools get, I thought that was okay. The contract, you mentioned that. The notion that the students, though, are not getting something in return, that's the elephant in the room, and you need to discuss that and talk about why that's insufficient or inadequate, why the trade-off is unreasonable, or there's some problem with it. I'm not exactly sure why you're ignoring that key piece of information there. All right, thank you. I'm going to stop there.